What up, everybody? And welcome to season 6, episode 14 of Dualistic Unity with Jackie and Amanda. And this was a incredible fucking conversation about giving ourselves a little bit more grace, and that being the key that opens up so much possibility for growth and just the ability for all of us to live our lives in a way that's a lot more relaxed and in tune with each other and with the rest of nature. So, yeah, hope y'all enjoyed.
Oh, yeah. We get into everything from mental health stigmas around periods, capitalism, the way that we live and work, and just it's a meaty episode. So very excited for you all to see it, and let us know what you think, because this is a conversation that we're all a part of, whether we feel like it or not. So excited to hear back from you all, and check it out. Recording in progress. So, beep boop, beep
Marks the
boop.
beginning of our episode today. We were just talking about our periods. We were
It's
just talking
all.
about, yeah, we were talking about periods in general and how, like, it would be really cool if the experience that we go through as women every month, right, of pain and hormone fluctuations and differences in energy levels and all of that was factored into consideration in the workplace, and maybe that places would acknowledge that as being something that would influence your performance, as well as maybe giving you accommodations to make that a little bit more seamless. And it's not in a way that's like, yeah, like women need extra help, right? Because we have this thing that bleeds, right? Like we have these parts that work in a certain way. It's not that we're any less capable or able to be less productive than a man can. It's just the cycles that we work in and that our body works in are just different. And one is not better or worse, and it's not the same for every woman or every man. Like it's just like embodying different variations on the different ends of the spectrum of human experience, right? So it's not black or white or anything like that. And it wouldn't be too much of a burden, I don't think, to these workplaces to provide those considerations. They just don't really want to think about it. Like women have been traditionally conforming to a male dominant, like women weren't in the workforce for a long fucking time, at least not the traditional workforce. Like there was definitely a lot of domestic labor that is also swept under the rug, and that's a different conversation. But like we've had to conform to this system that was designed with men in mind and how men work, right? And it's also very competitive and highly individualistic rather than cooperative. And so like we all feel this need to be the perfect worker and force ourselves to deny ourselves sometimes, like not eating at work until your designated lunch break, or like not being able to take time off when you're dying of period cramps and you have to just go in and suffer the whole time when you could be at home with a heating pad, on your laptop and probably doing a lot better work, right? So like if these things were taken into consideration and people were treated as people and seen as people by their management and by the system as a whole, rather than being like cogs in this machine that doesn't care about them, like it would be beneficial to everybody involved. Work culture would be so much more positive because people would feel like they were actually seen and taken care of, and I think performance would increase as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. And it's crazy that people don't really see that as something that could be considered. And I think, you know, there might even be some people today, like some women who would push against that because they're like, no, women can do everything that men can. And like, I understand the principle of that, yes, but women can do things that men are not capable of doing, and vice versa. Like, that's like we can push out a baby, a man can't do that. And that doesn't mean one is better or worse, right? We're like just different, and that should be allowed to be something that's allowed and taken into consideration within our structures as well. You know, like it's the difference between true equality, which is like everybody has the same exact like that's like treating everybody as if they have the same exact starting point, or like they are exactly the same, right? Versus equity, or I might be having it switched up, but the equity is like giving people what they need specifically, right? Like supporting them in the way that they can be supported so that everybody is sort of more equal on a more equal playing field, rather than treating the entire workforce as a monolith. And there are certain considerations that are put into place for like people with disabilities and things like that. I'm not saying being a woman is a disability. But you know what I mean? Like we do that in some areas, or for like some different groups, but yeah, I think that's totally something that's a reasonable request to, you know, take a sick day, or not a sick day, have just like a menstrual leave day. And you're like, "Hey, I'm on my period and you do not want me to come in today." Like like believe me, it's for both of our own best interests, right? That like we figure something out here. And that can be worked around. So that's where we're starting today. Periods. Wow, I was wondering when we'd start talking about periods.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's all my fault, guys. Today is the second day of my cycle, and I am feeling ugh, like I lost a fight. Like physically. Like I don't mentally feel like I lost a fight, but I just feel like I just got beat up. Like, oh, straight for, the gut. Ugh, but I also still had to work today. And today on my lunch break from work, we were guests on the podcast High and Empowered podcast with Oren and Julia. And I still was able to eat, a little something, and I was still able to work, and I still felt productive today, but I feel pooped. But I'm not sick, right? So I don't want to use my sick time um unless I'm actually sick. And it just would be cool if if I could just have a block of menstrual leave time where we know that I'm not sick, so you can reach me, you can still email me, but maybe no meetings. Maybe I leave earlier or start later in the workday. Like I like that there's just an adjustment to that day, because it's not always perfectly timed. My cycle is a couple of days early, but I know I've been a little bit stressed at work, and that stress impacts my body, and that impacts the way that it produces, its habits, or maintains itself. That's the way that it maintains itself. And sometimes it's a little early, a little late, perfectly, it's 28-day cycle. But it'd be cool. And if that benefit was there, also if the stigma wasn't there, that I could come back to work the next day, everybody would know that I took a couple of hours off, or that I was just not available for meetings for half of the day or something, and they didn't treat me differently when I came back to work. Because last year, I believe in March of 2023, but at least I know in early 2023, Spain became the first European country to have paid menstrual leave. But a lot of the women in Spain, they surveyed later in the year, a lot of women didn't use it, because the benefit is specifically for debilitating pain. And this is like, you are in so much pain that you can't sit, you can't walk, you are just writhing in pain. It just knocks you out. And not like like knocks you out like you're unconscious, but just like knocks you on your ass. You can't do anything because you're just in so much pain. So you'd have to have a doctor's note to prove that. But for some women who do have that, they didn't even feel like they could use this benefit that is now legally available in Spain because they felt guilty. They didn't want to come back to work and think that, their coworkers would think that they just took the day off because they didn't want to work. So it's just this constant, like, so many instances, people just don't believe that your suffering is real, whether it's physical or emotional or mental, and you almost have to prove it. Um, and that's such a shame because of course anybody could abuse anything, right? But it just sucks that, we don't even trust each other enough that, and I bet you a lot, the stigma would discount the fact that you'd be required to get a doctor's note, that you'd be required to prove that you have debilitating pain. And yet still women think that even if they were to fulfill those requirements, that they would still be judged by their coworkers. And some of them are right. And that sucks. I'm really glad though that there is the period pain simulator machine that's out, and that more men have been encouraged to take it, and very few of them can make it up to level 10 because period pain is not a joke, and it definitely impacts the way that you can work and live. But now that more men are able to live that pain firsthand, it's real now. Now it's legitimate. Now that they understand how difficult it is, now, at least the narrative around period pain and around women taking it easy, or at least that narrative is changing. So I do appreciate that. It just it still sucks, that there are certain things that I can't address in the way that I would like to, that I just have to kind of like suck it up and go to work and just power through the pain. But that also makes me feel like incredibly resilient because I'm like, oh, I've got to do this. I've got to like forge on. And so I do feel incredibly powerful when I do power through those days. It just sucks that I feel like I'm required to power through more than I could rest, which might also be helpful. That might also help me bounce back better and stronger, right? If I did take the proper rest, because the United States culture definitely doesn't encourage you to listen to your body. It encourages you to just suck it up and keep pushing forward. And so many people sacrifice their health for their career, and then even if you do have a wealthy retirement, you don't have the physical ability to enjoy all of those sacrifices. So it just seems like a really fucked up game for everybody, both men and women. And it just doesn't need to be that way. So I'm so glad that we have these chats, and we're just not accepting this template as being unchangeable.
Exactly. Like this is the change happening, and we can be a little patient, but yeah, we're going to call it out for what it is. It's fucked up that anybody can't just like miss a day of work for if they need to, right? The reason that there's such a stigma against doing that is because like people don't like working, and so of course people like would abuse, not maybe not abuse, but like of course people would just want a day off sometimes, so they're going to lie and say, "Oh, I've definitely done that." Are you kidding me? Like I've definitely lied about why I wasn't coming into work just because I didn't want to go. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad worker, right? Like I get my shit done for the most part, but we expect way too much out of ourselves and of each other. We really don't need to be working 40 hours a week at all. Like I don't work a traditional 9 to 5 job, but there are friends that I have that do that, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll finish my work for the day and I just have to stay there and be, I don't know, look like I'm busy." And I'm like, "What is the point of that? Give people their time back." And I think the more that I begin to prioritize my own experience over like any sort of external perception of what my life is or how others are seeing me, like I'm more okay taking those, like, mental health days, but like the women in Spain who didn't use that benefit, like, if you stake a lot of your identity in your career, in the way that you're perceived and, like and culturally, you're striving towards a value of, like, extreme productivity, which is the case in the US, um, like, you will just sort of suffer through it. And you'll judge people that give themselves a little bit of a break because secretly you want a break. Secretly, you wish you could take a day off, right? And you're just part of this rat race too. And like, rather than, supporting that, it's like we judge each other because we don't feel like, I don't know, because secretly we're jealous. That's honestly what it is. Like, we want to give ourselves that grace, but like, we have such a stick up our ass that we can't. So we just have to judge the people that don't.
Oh my God, I totally wanted to. I was so jealous of cigarette smokers when I used to work at a fast food restaurant. When like my first job ever, working fast food, and I was so jealous of cigarette smokers because they got like all these extra breaks. Like they got like a 15-minute break like every couple of hours, and I was just like, am I getting extra vacation time? What the fuck is up, guys? Like this is some bullshit. I'm here 8 hours of kicking butt. I'm flipping these burgers. I'm mustard and ketchup and putting it all together and in the bag. Thank you. Have a nice day. Come back again soon. And I'm not taking an extra 15 breaks, an extra 15 minutes every couple of hours. I'm just like, damn, I think lung cancer is worth it. No, I was kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. If it wasn't for the terrible taste, and this is my own opinion, you know, say eat to each their own, right? Different strokes for different folks. Love all these little sayings. But I definitely tried smoking cigarettes because it was like I was curious, and I'd go to parties, and people would be going outside, and I'm like, what's up? What's all this about, guys? What's so appealing? Give me a little bit of that. It's terrible. What are you guys thinking? This tastes like garbage. And that's probably very accurate to what I said in that moment. But if it wasn't for that, I hated the taste of it. I think I would have just jumped on the wagon because it felt like you were able to take a little bit more of a break, and it was okay. Like you were allowed to go. But I had remember reading in like I don't know if it was China or if it was another I'm pretty sure it might have been in China where the people who didn't smoke in a company got extra vacation time. And I was like, that's dope. I love that. Your cigarette smokers still got to take their extra breaks, but the other people who didn't take extra breaks, they got extra vacation. I was like, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. But it is true that like I just didn't enjoy work. And so many people don't enjoy work, but you have to, and you have to sell your time. So even if you get the job done, you still sold 8 hours of time. And so you have to stay there. And that makes no sense at all. It's because these rules, these templates are made with no consideration for like the whole, and are only focusing on the employer getting the bigger end of the stick, and the rest of the employees getting the short end of the stick and selling their time. And it just didn't used to be that way. When you would go to see someone, when you would go to see the baker, when you would go to see the blacksmith, you never bought their hours, you bought the finished product. And so if it took them a week, and of that week, they probably worked 2 hours, it didn't matter to you. There was an agreed upon time for something to be ready. And if there needed to be an extension, I think that people were a lot more flexible because your time wasn't something that you bought or sold. Your time was spent how you wanted it to. And so it was based on the activity, not based on how long it took you to do that activity. So you painted as long as you needed to paint, you baked as long as you needed to bake. And it seemed like that made much more sense. And us selling time, we think that that's the better way, and it seems to be not. It doesn't seem like it's working. But if I were to bring this conversation to work, everybody would look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean we're not? Like, well, how do I know that something's going to get done? It's like because the business is still in business. Like that's how you know you're doing things in a way that's successful or efficient, is that you're still going. It's not a matter of having 500 employees who all give you 8 hours a day. Is the business thriving? And so, that isn't something that you can easily time block.
Yeah, it's not that simple. Like time in doesn't necessarily exactly correlate with success, right? Like sometimes rather than just if you take the example of like when you're in school studying for a test, it's actually not the best idea to study for 8 hours straight, right? It's best to take it in a little chunk, take a break for maybe an hour or two, study another little chunk, take a break, study again, and maybe split that up into multiple days, right? Give yourself time. And the time spent away is also like productive to what you're doing because it gives you more energy when you can push a little bit and sit back and push a little bit. You can go for much longer, and the work that you do is probably going to be a lot more quality. So it's not just about how much time you're spending actually working. It's just about finding a system that works for you. Like, and if that does require a certain amount of hours, that's fine, but just like figure that out. And it doesn't have to be so excessive. It's not just more, more, more. Pushing as hard as you can doesn't necessarily get you the best result. And yeah, I like how you brought up like more of a trade based economy, right? Like the things that we were doing for work were more down to earth. They were like tied to our actual needs in day to day life, right? And like you said, we only spent as much time working as we needed to. And then because we saw work not as like a means to an end, but it's just like we're playing our role within this community because we all want to survive and keep living, right? So like our work was fulfilling in that sense, right? Because we knew we were having an impact and we were participating in the community and helping the people around us. And so like we only worked as much as we need to. We did the things we did. We made as much money as we needed to keep living. And then we enjoyed the rest of our time. And now we live in this economy where the things that like we do on a daily basis for work most of the time don't really have that big of an impact on our direct experience or like there's companies that are just made to sort of like fill a need that we feel societally, like cosmetic companies for example. Like we do not need that. Like we do not need 4 billion shades of lipsticks and like different makeup brands, but like we're in a society that values beauty. And so there's all these companies that are based on beauty being a priority, right? And like all these people are working for something that maybe they don't find personally fulfilling, but they're just making money, right? They're making money and it's like I don't know, you're just kind of detached from the work that you're doing really meaning anything. And like, I don't know, it could be any job. Like there's a lot of work right now that's so far removed from what actually matters. And so like why and plus people are just doing things because they feel like they should, right? They want to be perceived in a certain way even if they don't necessarily give a fuck about whatever they're doing. They just want the paycheck. So like there's a lot of reasons why we're a little bit more disconnected from work and from each other. And yeah, I forget where I was necessarily going with that, but I think that difference is so stark. And that probably explains why we're all so dissatisfied in work, in our jobs, right? Because maybe we need to re examine what we're doing this for. Like, what is the point? we're just working to work? Like, is are we working towards priorities that are good for the whole in the future? Like like we're not thinking generations down the line. And it doesn't have to be this way. Like we don't necessarily have to not pay enough, not pay people enough to just make a living, right? Like, and not have five different jobs, right? That would be one thing that would do wonders for like our work culture. We honestly don't need as many like businesses as we have in general, right? Like we could we could all do with less in terms of material things. So like that could be condensed, and there's so many changes that we could make if we're willing to look at the structure for what it is and not just continue, you know, putting band-aids on this machine that's limping already and is inevitably going to fail and collapse once we run out of natural resources, right? Or, you know, the temperature of the earth rises to an extent that is no longer suitable to human life. So it's like one or the other. Either we kind of, it's like we're going towards this wall and nobody really wants to say it because they don't want to accept it as truth. And I mean, not nobody, because we're out here talking about it and the change is happening. It's just, I'm curious to see whether we'll change and steer the ship in a different direction. And I'm curious to see what that change would look like before we smack into the wall of, I forget what the term is like in ecology of like the like maximum amount of life that the environment can support, or like the, or we have like a population control event because we throw off the balance so far that, you know, an equal and opposite response will happen, right? Like we are pushing the earth basically to its limits and it's going to smack us right back. And that's just the way that reciprocity and balance works in the universe. And yeah, so that it's either one or the other. So we might as well take responsibility right now for the way we behave at our own job. Like if we have things that we can do to help the people around us at our job, right? And like make it a more human environment and interaction, and like just run our business with people in mind, that will ripple out. But it's not about controlling and forcing change, but just questioning and helping people recognize that like change is possible and that it's okay to like want to do things differently, and that they should be able to be respected as a person and their needs be considered by their employers, and that doesn't make them entitled. It makes them like a person who's willing or who's deserving of respect, right? Just as we all are.
Yeah, like if you could ask for like a mental health day, which is what I imagine would have happened if let's say, you know, I was a barber, you know, 400 years ago, and you know, I'm having an off day and people notice. Like I'm pretty sure that somebody in my town would have came over to my little shop and would have been like, "Sir, you need to sit the fuck down. You're like, you need to go home. Like you do not, you need to be near no one with sharp blades. You are not in a right state of mind today. Like you need to just go for a walk." You know, like I am so sure that the town would have been sensitive enough to one of the people, one of the trades, you know, one of the tradespersons in their town, and would have saw them like a little off and would have told them to take a mental health day. But today that that would rarely happen because you either have to like take like a sick day and maybe sometimes get a doctor's note, so you have to go out of your way to like go to a 24-hour clinic or and get them to, you know, write you a sick note, versus just being able to have an honest conversation with your boss and saying, you know, I'm really having a tough day and you know, but I'm not sick. and I'm gonna take a longer lunch today. You know, I'm gonna be gone for a couple of hours, but it'll be enough for me to kind of let it go, let go what's going on internally, and reset, and then I'll be back, and everybody will be better off. But mental health is there's definitely a stigma around mental health, and so many people, we're struggling with that. We're seeing so many people struggle. In our instance in the US, there's a mental health crisis, and I've heard that for a few years. um, and it's not that I think that living today is harder than it was 1, 2, 4, 500 years ago. um, but I do think that the way that we are currently living is not working, and it doesn't need to be compared to any other time. It's just not working, and and us being honest about that gives us space to change it, and for you to have an honest conversation with your boss and saying, like, I'm feeling really out of it, and your boss might turn to you and say, me too. Like, we just got through the holidays, right? It is just January. And, people need to recover from the holiday season. And that is absolutely true. Sometimes spending time with your family is quite triggering. And so, but being able to empathize and relate to your coworkers about that, I don't do that. I don't tell my coworkers like, oh, the holidays were rough, because there's so many expectations and so many roles that we have to fill, and this, that, and the other. But if I did, I imagined a lot of people would resonate with that, and and but and I love what you said before, where you're like, maybe we have too many businesses, and it's like we have too many businesses trying to be the only business, trying to develop a monopoly. And you don't need infinite amount of businesses if your towns are self-sufficient, if people are self-sufficient, if people are able to grow some of their food, then we don't need so many supermarket chains out there. If people are able to grow their own hemp and then turn that hemp into gasoline, maybe we don't need so many gas station chains out there. um you know and each town could maybe have their own configuration based on their natural resources. But that would just mean that there would be a need for less businesses, because if your town could provide you with clean food and water and housing, then you don't need so many businesses that are selling you all these fancy, products. And I definitely like when you talked about cosmetics, because it's not that cosmetics are a bad thing, because you could make them naturally. You could make like a natural lip balm from beeswax and crushed cranberries, and there you go, you've got the red tint and you've got the moisturizing effect, and so you could make those things yourself. It's just that the way that we have cosmetics is that you need them. You're not as valuable without them. And the way that we market cosmetics is bad for our environment and for our own relationship with ourselves. But if you were making just your little chapsticks, and you're putting a little bit of your cranberry blush on, and your products weren't making you age faster, and then making this problem that your appearance isn't good enough worse, is the ultimate setup, in my opinion. Like, these cosmetics that are currently on the market tend to damage the skin that they're supposed to be illuminating. And so women who feel like they're not valuable enough, that they're not enough as a person, are doing damage to their skin, and then feeling worse about something they should have never felt bad about. No, we're not all supposed to look the same. No, we're not always supposed to have red, gorgeous, tinted lips. No, you're not always supposed to have glitter on your eyes, because you, without any makeup, is enough. You are a whole person, you're a whole experience. And so there's nothing that's out there that's going to complete you, but there are certain things that we need to address, like with our food and our water. And nowadays it feels like you have to fight tooth and nail to get clean water that doesn't have fluoride in it, or chemicals, forever chemicals in them, and finding clean, healthy food that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, to avoid eating the super processed, super cheap foods that are contributing to our chronic diseases, which is also contributing to the mental health crisis. So it just feels like, there are so many businesses out there, and really it would be better long term, in my opinion, your hometowns were taking care of those basic needs in a healthy way, and the whole town was collaborating. There was a community garden, and there's we're collecting rainwater, and we're filtering it through. Like it could be such a bonding experience if your hometown could just flourish without some big Walmart or any chain. It doesn't have to be any one in particular, but if you didn't need so many big chains taking up space, selling you faulty, less than quality foods and beverages and products that didn't poison you, solving a problem that you never really had.
Yeah, that sounds nice and all, but then I won't be able to be a billionaire. And I won't be able to have 7 mansions in different spots around the world, and I won't be able to fly around in my private jet, which, obviously is the key to happiness. Duh! Money is the key to happiness. Duh, everybody knows that. What's the Lana Del Rey lyric? It's like, "Money is the anthem of success." Um, I love her, by the way. But I disagree. Money, like, doesn't actually do jack shit for your fulfillment and contentment in life. And yeah, we fully fucking could have self-sufficient communities. We've done it before. We could do it again. Like, we're smart and capable. We can organize and we can build. Like, we built all of this, which is crazy. As messed up as it is, it's an accomplishment, right? It's like kind of cool, all the stuff that we've been able to do and create. And that can be acknowledged at the same time, realizing, okay, yeah, what we're doing is not sustainable. We're gonna hit. I looked up the word for the ecology term. It's carrying capacity, right? The carrying capacity um, can be defined as a species' average population size in a particular habitat, and it's limited by environmental factors like food, shelter, water, and access to mates. And if these needs are not met, the population will decrease until the resource rebounds, right? So we're using all of our natural resources at a rate that is not necessary. And eventually that's going to start limiting our ability to continue to exist at the scale that we do. Our population will decline. And personally, I think that probably isn't a bad thing. Like everybody's all like Elon Musk thinks that's the number one concern of humanity right now is population decline. But there's 8 billion motherfuckers on this planet. Something like that. And at some point something's got to give. And yeah, like we could scale back and like slowly change the way that we run things. And that doesn't mean we have to go back to the Stone Age, right? That doesn't mean we can't still use technology. But I think we've taken technology maybe to an extent that isn't necessary. And now it's just about consumption itself. Like it's about owning things just to own them, not for any particular purpose, not because it's fulfilling, but just because that's how we show off to each other. That's how we measure success in the system that values capitalism and values material wealth, because that is what keeps people going to work. That's what keeps people selling their life, selling the actual reality of their life for an idea of success, right? And it's not any one person to blame, right? I think we are collectively going through this psychosis of living for the idea of ourself or like the idea of stuff and having all this cognitive dissonance about things that we're not willing to look at because we don't want to feel uncertain. Like we're just collectively so afraid of uncertainty that we're living in an illusion and we're not willing to wake up and see what we're actually doing. And like we just need to keep believing that we're doing the right thing by continuing to come up with, you know, new cosmetic lines and new technology device, new watches that can do all sorts of different crazy stuff. And like, we think that innovation or like creating new things and getting more things is the objectively best thing to do. And that's going to make us fulfilled. And it's not. Like you said, this mental health crisis is very clearly demonstrating that something is not working, right? And we think that the problem is us. Like, we're encouraged to believe that the problem is us through the entire way that we're raised, right? We put that on each other, but we also put it on ourselves, right? And it's almost like we're in this crisis because we're trying to pretend that we're not. We're trying to pretend that we're not struggling, or that global warming isn't happening, and that the seas are not becoming acidic and like the glaciers aren't melting. What? No, that's a myth. No. And we're distracting ourselves with, things like buying more shit, with drugs and alcohol and numbing, right? And with just working ourselves to the bone, because we don't really have a relationship to like our actual life, our actual experience. We're so removed from reality because we're caught in this web of ideas and narratives and things and expectations that we're juggling constantly. And it doesn't have to be that way. Wow, like you can have your feet on the ground. And for now, yeah, I have to keep going to work, but I think the change is with you. The change is with your everyday decisions on and off the job of where is your priority. And nobody is going to be perfect. Nobody is like, everybody contributes to the problem, but everyone can also contribute to the healing. So it's not about perfection, it's just about intention and priority, which is just something that isn't considered in our economy and just like in our day-to-day lives most of the time. You have to you have to be able to sit and realize what's going on rather than just going through the motions. And that's what the vast majority of us are doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just going through the motions. Yeah. And being able to not go through the motions takes some honesty. Being able to look at the way that you live and how that contributes to a lack of fulfillment. Definitely it felt easier to say, I grew up in a broken system, and I wasn't taught how to X, Y, and Z, right? And so that felt a lot easier to say because I didn't want to own my part of it. And I also didn't want to take responsibility. And so I would rather like have this perspective of being powerless. And because then it's, if I'm powerless, then, it's not my fault. This is just happening. But that sucked, man. And I don't choose to have that perspective, because although it doesn't always feel pleasant, like the fact that it's on me is liberating. Like, despite any circumstances, I can make the most of it. There are people who are sentenced, who get a life sentence in prison, and they still are able to achieve like some kind of inner peace and read in the prison library. And not to say that, we're all an extreme example like that, or you have to be extreme like that, or there's no point in crying, nobody has it as hard, like everybody, it's not that. It does suck, it does feel incredibly hard, but there is no set of circumstances that you can't make the most of. And that I do feel strongly that. And I certainly don't always love the process of making the most of everything, but I do have a deep respect for it. and 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 once I get to a place that feels maybe more pleasant or doesn't feel as rocky, I do appreciate those moments where I'm like, man, I have to go to work because I have to, not because I want to. And I'm not inspired by this work. And I still have to go because I have a responsibility to take care of myself, to pay my rent, to buy my food, to pay for the gas, to in order to participate in this society that gave me a structure that I didn't at the beginning create. And so I get that part where you're like, damn, like this is some bullshit. You know, I didn't ask to have to participate. Yeah, but you are here. And so what you do with that is on you. And you know, and how we live changes it. And so I take these considerations in mind when I think about how I spend my time and money and effort. Is does this feel authentic to me? Does this impact anybody directly in a way that I know it doesn't have to? And, you know, I guess what would be a good example of that is probably like, it does the way that I live in my building like negatively impact my neighbors? You know, do I have my TV on too loud? You know, sometimes I do, and I'm like, oh snap, you know, I live near people, you know, so I make a consideration, and I keep them in mind. You know, I try not to throw parties at 2 a.m, you know, because I share a living space. You know, when I was deciding on a car to buy, I bought an older car, a car that would have went to, you know, that could have just been rusting in some lot. You know, I go to Goodwills, and not to say that every choice has to be like super sustainable and thinking of everybody. It's just that, you know, it doesn't hurt for me to make certain considerations some of the time. Sometime, you know, sometimes I do something that may seem selfish, you know, where I know a friend is having a hard time and I don't immediately jump to be the shoulder for them to lean on, right? And that doesn't sound like, you know, that doesn't sound very selfless, but it's like, yeah, but I also am not supposed to make everyone feel better all the time, right? So sometimes my choices don't really look nice, but they're authentic to my experience. So it just we can take that, or we could keep that in mind when we're deciding a business to start, when we're deciding a business to support, when we're deciding a house that we're going to live in. Does it have to be a smart house with devices that measure everything around you all the time? Like, no. I personally don't want to live in a smart house. I don't want to have technology measuring everything that I do so that my refrigerator is ordering my milk before I run out of the gallon I have in there. Like, no, I think I'll be okay if I have to wait 5 hours for a gallon of milk. Like, you know, like it's not like, it just seems like the way that we use technology is like to buffer us from living life. And that isn't healthy. And it just that's when a tool becomes a crutch, because we act like we can't live without technology, and we act like we can't live without capitalism, and we can. You know, and capitalism is driving this need that you need to buy, you need to be productive, you need to be creating and buying and selling value, but not being valuable. And capitalism is all great, but it also creates an environment that further worsens poverty and homelessness, because in order for capitalism to reward the people with capital, it that means that it's not as generous with its rewards for people who don't. You know, people that can get tax breaks because they make over a certain amount of money, there isn't a tax break for being under, you know, the poverty level. And when you try to get help from your government, you get a stigma against that. So there's stigmas against women's periods, there's stigma against mental health, there's stigma against getting help from the government if you're getting handouts. But if you're getting a tax write-off, that's smart, that's business savvy, and that's not getting a handout from the government. But when you're penalized by the system that you didn't, you know, that you're not trying to do poorly in, you know, you're getting a stigma for not being wealthy. And you know, I love that wealth, the definition of it is changing nowadays, and people are saying that like good health is real wealth. You know, being able to get out of your bed, being able to think a clear thought without missing half of it not amnesia, but Alzheimer's and dementia. Not having your fucking brain melt inside your skull is wealth. Not owning 15 apartment buildings and having a vacation property in every continent, and having 6 zeros follow, your bank account balance. Like, that's not real wealth and real success. Real wealth and success is having a community of people that you feel connected to and supported and loved by, a community and an environment where you get to follow your passions, and you can take a mental health day if you feel like you're about to snap, and you're not going to get ostracized by your community for being lazy and not wanting to contribute as a contributing member of society. Like, I really appreciate that we're redefining success and redefining wealth so that it's not so materialistic, because that definition has an unintended price tag.
We're just missing the mark a little bit. Like, we're just a little confused. We are under the impression that what we think is, best for the whole is what's best for capitalism, but really that's not what's best for the whole. Like, and I think it's beautiful how, in what from the current perspective of capitalism seems to be a counterintuitive way, that the best thing for the individual is also the best thing for the whole. And yeah, I think this change is already happening, right? Where instead of the stigma against workers for being human and allowing themselves to be human rather than trying to act all robotic and be just like a productivity monster, um, literally, domo arigato, Mr. Robot. Literally us all the time at work. But there's a shift happening where the stigma is now shifting towards greedy, like, CEOs and stuff, and companies that have a culture where their people are not seen as valuable. Like, you can feel that pressure building of people in the workforce being fed up and being like, things don't have to be this way. It doesn't make sense for companies to run in a way where their people aren't prioritized. And what's best for all of us collectively being what's best for us as individuals, like, both of those things need to be considered. And I liked when you were talking about responsibility. It's that, like, you don't have to always be nice and always do the right thing. It's a balance between navigating, like, what's best for you, the individual, and what's best for the whole. Like you said, like, turning your TV down if your neighbors are there. And that could translate, in the workforce, where, like, if your coworker is really, like, sick, or they're, maybe they have really bad period cramps. They're like, no, like, I just gotta tough it out. Like, you're like, you can just be like, hey, I'll do this for you. Go home, right? Or like, or you just sit there and rest. I'll pick up something for you. And even though that you might not want to do that, like, that's a little sort of sacrifice beneficial to everybody. And, if we do that for each other, people will do that for us as well. And it can be like this reciprocal thing where we take care of each other and we take care of ourselves at the same time, because we're focusing on what actually matters, rather than living in this world of ideas and pursuing this illusory idea of success and happiness. And we never really get there, and so we have to keep working, we have to keep striving, and we wonder why we're not happy, why we wonder why we're so disconnected and unsatisfied and lonely when we have the most comfortable, quote unquote, not everybody, because the wealth gap is getting bigger and bigger, as more people become more and more comfortable, like, the equal and opposite effect is happening. And it's it can be really disheartening to witness this happen, but it's not by pointing the finger that we fix that. It's more of inviting a conversation, but also living it, actually, just being able to take responsibility for the role that you play rather than pointing the finger at somebody else, because that CEO is you as well, right? And you have to remember that if you went through their life exactly the way they lived it, if, you know, it was beaten into your head that you weren't valuable until you made a certain amount of money, until you had a successful business. If that was beaten into your head and, you know, eventually you found success, like, of course you would just keep doing what you think you should do and getting more for yourself and the people you care about. And even if the consequences of your actions that you don't see because of cognitive dissonance are like horrible, right? Like you could be having an absolutely horrible effect on somebody else in the environment, but you can't see that as long as you think you're doing the right thing. And we all fall victim to this. Like that's just part of being a human being, is having these biases, right? Like in order to have this experience, we have to perceive ourselves as separate. And within that, um, there's a lot of ways that we can misunderstand what's actually going on and get confused and do things that if we had the clarity, we would see them for what they were. And I do not think it's worthwhile to shame yourself or anybody else for the way that you've participated in this system, because also at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with what's happening. And that can be really hard to admit. And like honestly, I'm a little bit hesitant being able to say like there's nothing wrong with what's happening in the world right now, because if you're looking at it, as a human being, and like there's just so much pain. There's so much separation. We made a big mess, right? And we got a little we walked a little bit too far off the path, and now we're in this place that's very scary. And that doesn't mean we're doomed. That's all I'm saying, really. I think we'd have to have a little bit of grace with ourselves in order to be able to look at things and change them. It's the same way in our individual lives. We have to look at what's going on with non judgment in order to be able to actually integrate what we learn and make change. Otherwise, we're just going to run away from that responsibility because we think it means that we're less of a person, we're less valuable, right? Because we think it means something about us. But it never does. And collectively, humans aren't evil because we've done this and we've done the things that we do. We're not evil. We're just we're just really smart monkeys who don't know how to wield this power of our mind, really. Or maybe not that we don't know how to wield it. It's just we're learning, evolution is happening. We're, you know, bumping against the walls of like experience, right? Like if you want to look at it that way, like this crisis that we're in right now is just an extreme level of what focusing on the idea of yourself can do. And I think what we're seeing now is it's coming back in the other direction, and a shift is happening. We are that shift happening, and eventually it's going to balance itself out. But I think individually and collectively, we're constantly oscillating between extremes. And just because we're at a point right now that feels like very tense and like something's going to give, it doesn't mean it's going to be the end of the world. And it doesn't mean like we're living in the worst period of humanity. And yeah, like we don't have to stress about it to that extent, because I definitely did for many years of my life, and I carried that weight with me all the time of just like everything is doomed, like we're fucked. And you're right, that made it easier for me to not look at what I was doing because I was like, who gives a shit anyway? Like it's all doomed. But if we all think that way, it that will happen, right? It will be doomed. We're the ones creating the narrative and we can change it at any time. And so we don't need to get all like low about it. And the more that you can let go of that weight, the easier it is to embody that change.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, collectively, we went in a certain direction, and collectively we can change direction. And I used to think about it like this. I was like, either it's too late and we can't change anything, we're fucked. Let's dance, let's rock out these last few minutes of humanity's existence on Earth. Or it's not too late, we still have time to fix it. Hey, even more reason to celebrate and dance our way to the solution. So it just felt like no matter if we were doomed or not, like it just felt like, well, why can't we enjoy ourselves either way? It just doesn't have to be such a drag. And but I do have a lot of faith in humanity as a whole, because it's just in my belief, we're not too far off. And I don't know that for sure, but it just feels like we're still here. And so if we're still here, there's at least a sliver of a chance that we could, think of ways to live differently, work differently, trade differently. We were bartering before, before we were so heavily dependent on money, exchanging money, which in the US, we're just exchanging papers of debt. Our dollar isn't even backed by gold anymore. It's just a piece of debt. So you're never really, it trips me up that I'm never really paying anybody. And so I pay my landlord debt. I pay the gas station's debt. And I'm like, this makes even less sense that I'm working for debt. And just so that just seems crazy. And but we still barter a little bit. I will, you know, you know watch someone's like cat as a favor. And maybe when I'm on vacation, if I had a cat, maybe they'd watch my cat on vacation. Like we could just trade cat sitting. We could just trade, just different things, because it's not always based on a dollar bill. But that is a little scary, because it's not something that I'm familiar with. And so because it's like foreign, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm used to working for debt. And so the alternative seems like risky, but this is also risky. There is no risk-free option, in my opinion, because every option has uncertainty. And so, but I am very excited that as we chat about this more, there are different tools. Like I love ChatGPT, and that's been like my new thing. Is like I love this tool, and I love that we could use AI to help us come up with options, come up with solutions. You could train AI to navigate our current legal system, to find ways to utilize federal and state funds to maybe support paying for a community garden. But so I guess that's how I feel, because like the current system isn't exactly conducive towards communities, like being together and working together and supporting each other. It's so it's like, how do you navigate this current system in a way that supports the change that you're trying to implement? So that definitely gets taken into consideration. And how sometimes you don't want to buy a piece of land or a building under your individual name, but you start an LLC, and the LLC buys the property because there are certain tax benefits and certain advantages that come from buying as a business than buying as an individual. So it's like learning all of these things because we kind of have to. And it does seem daunting at times, but it only feels daunting when I feel like it's on me. And as soon as I feel like I'm working with you, Jackie, I'm working with Dualistic Unity, I'm working with Andrew and Ray and the DU community, it's like, oh, all right. Well, there's a lot of work, but there's a lot of help. So, like it doesn't feel as like, oh no, like what are we gonna do? We're doomed and we're working on it. No, it's like we're not doomed, but we're still working on it. So I do love that, because there are barriers like the systemic barriers that have to be addressed, and businesses are not going to love that we're advocating for not buying their products, right? And they have a lot of lobbying power, and they have a lot of influence politically and economically, and so capitalism still exists, and so we still have to interact with it. So it's like this isn't going to be something that you change overnight, but I definitely think that just working together more and more, utilizing artificial intelligence tools and resources is a great way to start. And I am excited to see what trouble we get into, you know rocking the systemic boat.
Yeah, it's cool that we get to witness the changes that happens right in front of us, right on the ground, feet on the ground, rather than dealing in like conceptual morality wars, right? Like yeah, we're actually fixing shit. In reality, like you're creating another problem, or like I don't know, like true responsibility and reprioritization isn't happening, but it is at the same time we're doing that. And you're right, there's a lot of work, but there's a lot of help if we're willing to see each other as, part of the same thing rather than individual things who only care about themselves. Because we don't. We don't only care about ourselves. And we do, like, as much as you don't need any single person or any specific, like, we need each other. Like, we work together. And just in the same way as, like, an organ in your body is you, but it's not all that you are, like, you as an individual are you, but it's not all that you are. Like, you're also everybody else, right? That's the larger organism, and you are an organ within that organism doing your job, doing what you do best by being yourself. And, you know, you can trust the individual ways that you feel called to contribute, or you can trust that the things that you can do, the change that you're embodying, you can accept that that's enough. And you don't have to be worried and stressed all the time, because at the end of the day, your experience is all that you have. So it's never worth sacrificing your peace of mind and ability to enjoy every single moment, even if you do have to go to work to a job that, you know, isn't the most fulfilling to you. You can you can find fulfillment in unexpected ways when you're more just accepting of whatever it is you're going through in general. And so that's kind of the key to one, unlocking more change, but also like making the most out of what you have right now and what your life is right now. And I love that you brought that up before, the like just I will make the most of whatever situation I'm in, and that's all really all you can do. And like but that but then when you think about what that looks like, individuals making the most out of wherever they um are going to get along pretty well, right? Like individuals who are both trying to, make the most out of any situation and aren't like trying to necessarily control it, but also are willing to be responsible for it and like are enthusiastic about it, whatever it is they're doing. Um, that's inspiring, and that ripples out, right? And then all of a sudden, you're having way more of an impact. Maybe like one person at a company changing their attitude ripples out through the management and like touches somebody in upper management, and they're like, oh wow, we can restructure this whole thing, and you can have that sort of level of impact, but it's not by trying to have that impact and force your will. It's just doing what's easier and more enjoyable for you anyway, which is making the most out of your life, your experience, the people that you talk to every day. Like, how are you approaching how you move through the world? And that's just something to keep in mind always. And there's no nailing that down. There's no really understanding what that is. You can't know your impact, but it's still there. And it's dependent on your impact on yourself, like the way that you choose to embody your reality, right? The way your I'm forgetting, I don't know the word, like your essence, I guess, the essence that you bring to all whatever it is you do, just your life in general. Um and Yeah, but this has been a great conversation. I think this would be a cool point to wrap up, if that's cool, Amanda. Stay tuned for our research and information literacy workshop in a month or two here, and we'll be releasing the dates for that soon. But yeah, speaking of, taking responsibility, making the most out of your situation, we have so much access to information these days, and it is in our own best interest and the best interest of everybody involved. Same thing, right? We're parts of the same organism, for us to use these tools for all of our own benefits, right? For our own understanding of the world, but also in the decisions we make, the businesses that we choose to support, and the way we carry ourselves in general. And we can spread that information, and that's one of our biggest superpowers, right? Is our use of information and our ability to keep questioning and refining the way that we exist. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And we got a couple retreats coming up as well.
We've got the California retreat, which has the contest connected to it. And so people that are able to make a video, that's going to get picked, I think, next week. So that's really cool. I'm really excited to see who the winner is for the California retreat, because there was a contest, make a video about your experience with DU, or just something relating to DU, and the video with the most views would win a free ticket to the California retreat. And so that winner's going to get picked next week. So very pumped to see who's getting that free ticket. Jackie and I will be at the California retreat, and I'm really glad, Jackie, that I get to watch your, like, the ways that you're finding to contribute. Like, I love the being yoga with yourself and with Andrew, and being able to create space for people to learn yoga in an environment that maybe they're not getting direct access, and bringing your mindset and your enthusiasm and your passion and your essence to that, shows how much it can be enjoyed, and just proves that it's a legitimate option that is available to someone else. And that changes someone's whole world. You just having fun and being yourself and doing something that you enthusiastically love for no other reason than you just love to do it, not because you're getting paid to do it, not because you're a representative of yoga, not because it's supposed to be what you're supposed to do. It's just, you just love it, and people get to see that, and that is enough to inspire someone to consider what they might love to do, if that's not what they're currently doing. So very excited to continue to ripple with you, and excited for our workshop, and just I know that you and I are going to be making a renewed effort to use the tools and brainstorming together, because working together is the best way. It's a lot more fun, and it's a lot more effective. And so instead of thinking that you have to solve the world's problems or your problems, just being able to share your brainstorming process, your approach, and sharing that with people around you, and letting them share their experience with you, can sometimes make all the difference. So although it can feel like a lot, there's a lot of you, there's a lot of us that is also there. So it's not just reality is this overwhelming thing that's happening around you, would say you are an integral part of that with everyone else. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And I look forward to our next DU Reel, Fridays at 4 p.m. And looking forward to chatting again soon, everyone.
Love you, Amanda. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie.